much for supporting the Sudbury Historical Society and for joining us in this long-awaited launch of the book From Your Loving Son by Mary Ellen Hoover, Ellen Niederman, and Diane James. I hope you all have a program, and I hope you're all aware, too, that we have earphones out in the lobby, which you could use if you need. So now I'll turn the program over to Ellen Niederman.
Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Niederman, and I am one of the 3 authors of this new book, From Your Loving Son, along with Mary Ellen Hoover and Diane James. Would you please stand? First, we would like to thank the Sudbury Historical Society for allowing us to create this book. We would also like to thank the Sudbury Foundation for their continued financial support over the past 10 years, especially Marilyn Martino for her continued guidance. We also would like to thank the Sudbury Cultural Council and the Massachusetts Cultural Council for believing in this project and providing us with another generous grant. I would like to today thank Kevin Tucker of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War for providing this wonderful uniform today for George. And also like to thank Elizabeth DeLucia for her beautiful piano music. We have some very special guests with us here today. Nancy Janning, would you please stand? Nancy is the great-granddaughter of Alfred Marshall Moore, one of the Moore sons, and she came here from Florida to be with us today. Is Natalie Eaton here? Natalie Eaton? She is the great-granddaughter of Rufus Hurlbut, George's cousin. Thank you. And we have Jim Moore and George Moore, who are direct descendants of Curtis Benjamin Moore, Uriah's brother. Thank you for your amazing ancestors. They were so interesting to learn about. The year was 1862, and the nation was fighting the Civil War. Sudbury, Massachusetts, a small New England farming community, was ready to support the cause of the Union. Uriah and Mary Moore, a local farmer and his wife, parents of 10 children, sent 4 sons off to fight for the Union. George Frederick Moore was only 20 years old when he and his older brother Albert joined the 35th Regiment Massachusetts Volunteers in 1862. Their oldest brother John had enlisted in the 13th Regiment and had been serving since 1861. In 1864, a 4th and younger brother, Alfred, joined the 59th Regiment. This was not the first time this family had sent soldiers into battle. More ancestors were fought in the Indian Wars, and during the Revolutionary War, they fought at Concord and Lexington, and also at the Battle of Bunker Hill. George wrote home from 1862 to 1865 of battles, travel, lack of rations, and the weariness of a soldier, while his family in turn wrote to George telling him of their love for him, the news of the family, their news of the town, and their views of the war. George Moore took part in battles from South Mountain and Antietam to Fredericksburg, Vicksburg, Campbell Station, the Siege of Knoxville. He participated in the battles of the Wilderness, Cold Harbor, and the assault on Petersburg. This book is a story of a small New England town, a patriotic family, and the Civil War. It has been a very long labor of love, and we are so proud to be able to present it to you today. Now I would like to introduce our readers. George Moore will be played by Sean Broder. George's father, Uriah Moore, will be played by Lee Swanson. George's mother, Mary H. Moore, will be played by Ursula Lyons. And George's oldest brother, Francis, will be played by Ryan Kenny. In early September of 1862, George and Albert's regiment left Linfield, Massachusetts for the State House in Boston. They picked up their regimental flags and traveled to Virginia. By September 17th, they would find themselves in the battle at Antietam-Sharpsburg, which would become known as the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. More than 23,000 men lost their lives. George and Albert, as members of the 35th Regiment, and George's brother John, as a member of the 13th Regiment, all fought on this day. John was wounded. After hearing the news of the recent battles, Mary Moore was very concerned for her son's safety, and she wrote to her son George, asking them how they were.
Sudbury, September 17, 1862. According to the reports in the newspaper, you know what it is to be in a battle. We are very anxious to learn the particulars. I hope we shall not hear anything but good news. We have had one letter from John since you left home. He spoke about seeing you. He said it was good to see you and the other boys from Sudbury. I think it must have been a happy meeting for all. I hope it will not be long before the rebellion will be put down and the war come to an end. What glorious news that would be. It is getting late. I must bid you good night. From your loving mother.
October 3rd, 1862. Dear George, I received your letter of the 5th of September and was glad to hear that you stood your journey so well. I've heard your regiment was in that big battle of Wednesday and done themselves great honor. It seemed too bad to have to go into battle so soon after getting out there, and to have so many killed and wounded. I have been turning some potatoes. They don't yield much, and they don't sell in Boston for only $1 to $1.25 per barrel. Your father.
Dear Father and all the rest, it is a stormy day. We have to build large fires and then build our tents around them to keep warm. When we march, our great coats keep us warm. I don't know as we shall see any winter's quarters. We could get along well enough if we had enough to eat. They have to keep sending the baggage train back for provisions, and then we have to go on short allowance until they catch us again. The general rode through our regiment today and told us we had to save our bread, for the train had not caught up with us yet, and he didn't know how soon that would be. That is consoling this stormy day. I remain your loving son, George.
On November 15, 1862, the 35th Regiment under General Burnside began to advance toward Richmond by way of Fredericksburg. It would become one of the most difficult marches of the campaign. As the 35th traveled over the hills, missiles came whizzing by. While guns were set up, artillery fired from both sides. Meanwhile, in Sudbury, Uriah Moore had been declared an insolvent debtor. His estate was sold at auction. They allowed his wife Mary $500, and then his property was purchased.
December 18th, 1862. Dear George, I wish we could get a box of victuals for you, out to you. The family was all together at the old place Thanksgiving Day, but for George, Albert, and John, we partook of a Thanksgiving supper, and then to see those vacant seats at the table, it would bring to mind those dear ones that used to be filling those seats in former times, that they are far away in war, perhaps nothing but hard bread and coffee for their supper. I hope that we shall all set down to a Thanksgiving supper next Thanksgiving at our new home up in the middle of town. Then it is consoling to think that you were engaged in a good cause. From your father.
In July of 1863, troops were marching into Jackson, Mississippi. The heat was unbearable, and the drinking water was said to be poisonous and malarious. The 35th continued to support the skirmishes, being relieved daily by other regiments. The Confederates decided to evacuate the city rather than be captured. On the morning of July 17, 1863, the 35th Regiment was the first to enter the city of Jackson, Mississippi, raising the national flag to the top of the Capitol.
September 13th, 1863. Dear Albert and George, I am very glad to learn that you are having some time to rest after the hard time you had in Mississippi. I read a letter in the Marlboro Journal, which gave a dreadful account of the sufferings in the campaign to Jackson. I am glad I did not know your situation at that time. I should have been discouraged about ever seeing you again. It seems as though I would not be thankful enough that your lives were spared. I hope it will not be your lot to go through another siege like that. Some people think the war is nearly over. I hope so. But I suppose the rebels will hold out as long as they can. Your mother.
Crab Orchard, September 19th, 1863. Dear brother, I received your letter a few days ago. It was good to hear from you and to hear that you are well. I'm glad you didn't have to come out here, for I think 3 out of our family is enough. If it is not, let us do double duty. I don't know whether you would stand it out here. Our kind of living would suit you, our food I mean, but sleeping on the ground with a little shelter tent would soon use you up. Sometimes we don't have that over us. Sometimes we have to lay down with our equipment on, guns at our side, and nothing over us. When we get up in the morning, our heads feel as though it had been through a vice. 2,300 prisoners went through this place yesterday. Burnside took them at Cumberland Gap. They were the same dirty sets of graybacks that we see everywhere. I must close now, for I've got to go on duty. Give my love to all the folks and friends. From George.
October 4th, 1863. Dear George, I will take this opportunity to write a few lines to you, and will send them with Mr. Willis. I was so glad to get hold of his hand. It seemed almost as though I'd gotten hold of your hands. Lieutenant Hudson called on me when he was here. He spoke very highly of you and Albert and all the Sudbury boys. You had a chance to exercise your courage and firmness at the Battle of Jackson, Mississippi, and you did it with honor to yourself. I was very much obliged to you for the $20 you sent. I have used all the money in providing for the family. I was glad to hear that you had left that unhealthy state of Mississippi. I hope you can stop in Kentucky. I should like to come out and see you. Mr. Willis gave me an invitation to come out with him. My harvesting is done, so is not done, so I cannot leave. You have won an honorable and noble spot in history that cannot be blotted out in the present generation. Write as often as you can from your father.
October 5th, 1863. Dear George, I understand you have been promoted on account of your bravery in the field of battle. It sounds rather better than it would if you had run. I'm glad I did not see you stand in that dangerous place, and I'm very thankful that you was preserved from harm. I often think how many mothers have been called upon to give up their sons who were just as dear to them as mine are to me. I hope I shall never forget to acknowledge the hand of God in sparing your lives. I believe you gave leave when you went away for the boys to wear your clothes, so you will not expect to find them all when you return. I bid you good night from your loving mother.
George's oldest brother, Francis, was in poor health that kept him from serving in the war. He stayed in Sudbury working on the farm. He kept himself informed of the news of the town the news of the war, and he relayed all of this news to his brothers.
Sudbury, December 9th, 1863. George, the papers say that General Grant has gained a victory over Bragg's army and is expected to capture Bragg's whole force. The Banks expedition has arrived in Texas and has captured a number of cities on the Rio Grande River. Fort Sumter is being hammered upon yet and is about demolished by this time, probably. I wrote you all about the elections throughout the North and also about the new call for 300,000 more men. If not recruited by the 5th of January, a draft will be instituted to make the numbers. The President is determined to keep the Army up to its present standard, in numbers at least. Recruiting is quite brisk in some places. In New York City, 1,000 men volunteered in a week. Some of the towns of Massachusetts have filled their quotas and a surplus over. There are some who state that they will enlist before suffering their names to a draft. Francis.
December 29th, 1863. Dear Albert and George, I received a letter from each of you last evening and was rejoiced to hear from you. We have been to the post office every night for a long time but could get no tidings from you. I tried to look on the bright side and think it was because the communication was cut off. Still, I could not help feeling very anxious about you, for I knew there had been a dreadful battle out there, and the papers said the 35th Regiment were in the fight. I'm thankful I did not know your situation at the time of the battle. How did you feel when you knew you were surrounded by the enemy? We see that he who has guided you through so many dangers was able to protect you even then. I hope we shall never cease to be grateful for past merries and to pray for future blessings. May the time come soon when our country will be at peace and our friends return to their homes in safety. Please write every opportunity from your ever-loving mother.
In January of 1864, the 35th Regiment was located at Blaines Crossroads, Tennessee. This location was so far from their base that supplies were nearly impossible to obtain. The regiment's suffering was the worst they had yet experienced. Throughout January and February, George wrote in his diary, "No clothing yet. Many men go nearly barefoot. Each man is issued 2 squares of rawhide to fashion himself some sort of foot covering to protect his feet from the cold, rain, and snow. Smallpox has become such a threat that everyone has been vaccinated."
Strawberry Plains, East Tennessee, January 20th, 1864. Dear Mother, we received your letter a day or two ago. We are very glad to hear from home. They are the first letters we have received for nearly 6 weeks. We're having a pretty good time. Nothing to do. We are getting half rations yet, but we get enough to eat by foraging. We were paid off at Knoxville. I have some money to send you when I get the chance, but we have not received any clothing yet, only some shoes. You wanted to know how we felt when we were surrounded. I felt a little blue, especially Thanksgiving Day, but I know that we have a good general, and I know the Rebs will have to work hard to take this place. I will be closing, hoping to be with you all soon, from your son, George. Near Cold Harbor, Virginia, about 10 miles from Richmond, June 8, 1864. Dear brother, Curtis Smith is taken prisoner. Alfred is wounded and in the hospital. Although all the other Sudbury boys are all right. There has not been much fighting for 2 or 3 days. I suppose it'll take a long time for them to get to Richmond now, for the Rebs are well entrenched, and we will have to dig them out. I will close, hoping that this will find you all well. From George.
On May 6th, only 10 days after Alfred's regiment left Massachusetts, it was engaged in the Battle of the Wilderness. It was here on the North Anna River that Alfred Moore was severely wounded. He would not return home until September of 1865.
Friday, July 1st, 1864. Dear brother, your letter dated June 5th came to hand a while ago. I was glad to hear from you. I received one from Alfred and also one from Albert. Albert wrote but little news, but I see by the papers that there's been some hard fighting before Petersburg. I'm glad that all of you can see each other occasionally. Alfred writes that his side is better. For the past week, he has felt pretty comfortable. He is at the U.S. General Hospital, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He has the best care and the best to eat. Rufus Hobart is in the hospital at Washington, I believe, and rather slim, having a slow fever, so he writes his parents. Edwin Parmenter has been killed. He went out last summer as a substitute for his brother, who was drafted. Congress has now abolished the commutation clause. Therefore, every able-bodied man who is drafted must serve or provide a substitute. Hope this will find you well. Francis.
July 3rd, 1864. Dear brother, my company is with the regiment now. We joined them last week. I have to work every night this week and sleep during the day. I'm getting used to it. I don't mind it much. We are building a fort out in an open field. They fire at us all night even though they cannot see us. If any of us gets hit, it will be a chance shot. We lay down to dig, and the bullets pass over our heads. When a bullet comes near us, we say, "A miss is as good as a mile." None of the company has been hit yet. The fort is nearly done. The army is growing larger, for the conscripts and recruits are arriving every day. Write soon. Give love to all my inquiring friends. From George.
Sunday, July 17th, 1864. Dear brother, I have received your letter dated the 3rd. I also received one from Albert, Alfred, and John. The 13th Regiment has not arrived home yet. Arrangements are being made in Boston and also Sudbury for a public reception on their arrival home. Alfred writes that he is getting along pretty well. Says that he has escaped a good deal of hard fighting, but not a good deal of hard pain. The 4th of July passed off with considerable eclat in Sudbury, with the clanging of bells interspersed with a few powdered guns. The levee was held in Town Hall. The proceeds will benefit the sick and wounded soldiers. A few speeches were had, and songs by the Methodist choir. I suppose it was quite a contrast to the 4th with you. The Richmond papers say that the Union salute on the 4th near Petersburg knocked over quite a number of Rebs. I suppose that you have heard that the President has called for 5,000 more men from Massachusetts and men from other states to serve 100 days to repel the invasion. In Boston, full companies have been trained in the space of 2 or 3 days. Hope this will find you well. Francis.
On July 22nd, the 35th Regiment arrived home to Boston and proceeded to Faneuil Hall. A large banner read, "Welcome home, 13th." The ladies in the hall threw bouquets and kisses and waved their kerchiefs as the noble veterans filed in and took their places around the tables. John Moore was mustered out on August 1st of 1864 after serving 3 years of duty. He later returned to the war as a member of the Christian Commission. On August 16th, George wrote in his diary, "I'm not feeling very well today," and on the 22nd of August, he was brought to the 1st Division 9th Corps Hospital at City Point. From City Point, he was sent to Grant Hospital in Richmond, Virginia. He was suffering from typhoid fever.
City Point, August 30th, 1864. Dear brother, I have arrived here last Saturday. It is a very good place, but I shall be glad when I get out of it. When I left the hospital at the front, I had to walk to the division hospital. It took all afternoon and all night to get there. I was so sick, I could hardly sit up. When you write home, tell the folks how I am and where I am. Tell them I will answer their letters soon, but don't send my mail here, for I may leave any time. I must close. I'm awful dizzy. Write soon. From George.
December 4th, 1864. Dear George, your Aunt Olive received a letter from a soldier in Richmond who was in Richmond prison. He wrote that your cousin, Curtis Smith, died in Richmond prison on the 19th of October. This man was with Curtis when he died. It was Curtis's last request to this man that he should write to his mother if he had the chance. He did not give any particulars. So your aunt wrote right back to him, for she wanted to know the worst. This is the hardest stroke ever to your Aunt Olive. I must close, hoping I shall have better news to write next time. We are all well at home, but you three boys and Francis, hope this finds you well. From your father.
Camp near Petersburg, March 5th, 1865. Dear Father, we have had considerable rain lately. The roads are in bad condition for a move now, especially for artillery. We had a report yesterday that General Sherman fought a battle with Lee and that Sherman whipped him. I should not be surprised if Sherman gets into Richmond first and then gets to Washington in 1969 as our president. I understand that Sudbury has been quite a lively place this winter. I suppose it was partly on an account of the good sleighing. I would like a good sleigh ride, but I shall have to wait. Give my love to all the folks. Your son, George.
April 13th, 1865. Dear George, your mother received a letter from you last night stating that the Sudbury boys came out of the last great and glorious struggle all right. The greatest excitement ever was here in Massachusetts when the news came that Lee had surrendered with all his forces. People ran mad with joy. Bells rung, cannons fired, steam whistles are whistling, horns were blown in all directions. The stars and stripes were thrown to the trees. I wrote to you the day that your mother got home from New York, giving the particulars of her journey home. She was detained for 2 weeks on account of the great freshets washing the railroad bridges away. She had to leave poor Francis and bury him away out in western New York. But your mother got home all right and well. That $25 you sent home came at a time that done us more good than $100 at any other time. It helped pay for the sum we had to borrow to get out there. We are all well, hoping this will find you and Albert well. Your father.
Francis Uriah Moore died at the age of 31 years old on March 15, 1865, at our home in the hillside in Dansville, New York. This hospital offered a treatment called the water cure. His cause of death was never discussed in the letters, only that he suffered from brain fever.
April 30th, 1865. Dear George, your last letter did a great deal of good. It contained the first tidings about the Sudbury boys after the last battle. It relieved a great many anxious hearts. The Rebs have surrendered, but it seems they are not quite satisfied. They want to destroy our government some way. How dreadful it seems to think that such a dear, good man as President Lincoln should lose his life by the hands of an assassin. When we first heard of his death, we felt that our country was undone. But we feel differently now. It was wrong to place so much dependence upon one man. For Mr. Lincoln was only an instrument in the hands of God to carry out this great work which has been accomplished. His death reminds us that we must look above this world for help in these days of trial. I think there are not many men, if any, who are equal in all respects to Mr. Lincoln. It seems his heart was too tender to punish treason as it deserves. Perhaps that is why he was relieved from such a painful duty. The Rebs will see their mistake in having his life destroyed, if they have not seen it already. From your loving mother.
Alexandria, Virginia, May 5th, 1865. Dear Mother, I was very glad to hear from you and to hear that you are well. I was afraid your journey would make you sick. I cannot realize that I shall not see Francis when I come home. It seems as though I was to meet you all the same as I left you. I know we shall miss him when we see the things that belong to him and not see him around. We were wild with joy when we heard the official announcement from Grant, but in the midst of our rejoicing came the news of Mr. Lincoln. Then you should have seen the difference. Booth would have not fared well if the boys had got a hold of him. I'm glad that he met his death in the way that he did. It saves a great deal of trouble. It seems that Jeff Davis is concerned in the murder. Also, a great many of other leading men of the Confederacy. I hope they will catch all these men, and I think there is a prospect of it now. From your loving son, George. Alexandria, Virginia, May 14th, 1865. Dear John, I went with Rufus to Mount Vernon. It was General Washington's place. I have some magnolia leaves from a tree that he planted. I will send one in this letter. Tell Mother to put it with the other things we have sent her. Perhaps we may tell something interesting about them when we get home. I saw one of the grandest illuminations a few nights ago. There were nearly 12,000 men camped here together. We all illuminated our tents with a candle. Then each man stuck a candle in their muzzle, and we marched around the camp. We cheered for each regiment that passed. Not a breath of wind was stirring, so the candles burned first rate. It was a splendid sight. There is considerable talk of our getting home soon, but I don't know. We may get home before our time is out. Yesterday was my birthday, 23 years old. I shall be an old bachelor soon. Alfred comes pretty near. I laugh at him about it. Give my love to all, write soon, and tell me all that is going on in town. From your brother, George.
The 35th Regiment was mustered out on June 9, 1865. They arrived in Reedsville, Massachusetts, and on June 27th, the men were paid off, and they returned home to some grand local celebrations. At war's end, all 4 more sons would return home to their family in Sudbury. The Thanksgiving table would once again be filled, except for Francis. Our book continues on to tell the story of the Moore family following the war. We hope it is a story that you will enjoy. Now I would like to welcome Mary Vivaldi, the president of the Sudbury Historical Society.
Thank you very much, Ellen. That was a lovely presentation and all of the participants. And it's remarkable to think that in this very building, George Moore was married and the Moore family worshiped. And out in the belfry, there's graffiti on the wall that was made and signed by Charles, one of the Moore boys. Peek into the belfry to see the graffiti and go down the main stairways to the refreshments in the parish hall. Thank you so much for coming. Now I'd like to present the authors, Mary Ellen Hoover and Ellen Niederman, Diane Jane. There's a special flower in the center of each bouquet for the sequel.